find myself checking medication labels now, even for vitamins. It's a strange habit, born from a time when I was simply compliant. It was the summer after I broke my leg, and I spent nearly 3 months in a rehabilitation center just outside of town. Everything was predictably slow there, a quiet routine of physical therapy and scheduled pills, and I didn't question much of it at the time. It feels distant now, but the feeling of being closely observed has never really left me. The physical therapy was predictable. Band work, leg raises, the stupid little wobble board. Trudy usually ran my sessions, but today it was Ren. She was younger, maybe fresh out of school. She seemed nice enough. We were working on transfers, getting from the bed to the chair to standing, and it was slow going. My leg still felt like it had a mind of its own. After one particularly clumsy attempt, I was breathing hard, and Ren was adjusting the bed. That's when I noticed her looking at my wrist. Not at my wrist, but at the faded purple line where they'd taken the IV out. It's barely visible, honestly, just a discoloration. "Still a little tender there?" she asked, and I blinked. Yeah, a little. It's been a few weeks, though." She didn't meet my eyes. She just kept fiddling with the bed controls. Some people bruise easily, especially with the cocktail they give you. She said cocktail like it was a dirty word. It was a weird way to put it. I mean, it was a lot of meds, but everyone called it a pain management regimen. And she wasn't even my doctor or a nurse, technically, just a therapist. "It's just bruising," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm a terrible bruiser." She finally looked up, and there was something flat about her expression. "Yes, well, some people are just prone." Then she changed the subject, asking about my sleep. I figured she was new, maybe a little awkward. Probably just trying to make conversation and flubbed it. Still, it stuck with me. It felt like she knew I'd had a really bad night, restless and sweating, but I hadn't told anyone that. I just hadn't. I started taking the long way around to physical therapy. It added 15 minutes, but it meant I avoided passing the old greenhouse on Prue Avenue. I don't even know why I felt uneasy about it. It's just a greenhouse. Abandoned, boarded up, overgrown. But every time I drove by, I'd get this prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was watching from inside. Then came Trudy. I hadn't seen her since discharge. Trudy was one of the night nurses, older, always smelled faintly of lavender. She was at the front desk when I checked in. She didn't say hello, just looked up from a magazine, her eyes assessing. "Still working with Ren, I see," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, suddenly feeling cold. Yes, she is good. Trudy gave this little, tight smile. She's eager, very eager to learn. It was the way she said eager, like it wasn't a compliment, and then she mentioned the heating pad, the one they'd used on my shoulder during the worst of the muscle spasms. I hadn't told Ren about that. I hadn't even thought about that heating pad in weeks. "Just making sure you're comfortable," Trudy said before I could respond. She went back to her magazine. I figured Trudy was just nosy. Hospital staff gossip, right? It felt wrong. But maybe that's all it was. Maybe Ren had just talked to Trudy about my case, and Trudy was just remembering things. It made sense, sort of. During the session, Ren didn't mention anything specific, but she kept glancing at the doorway, like she was expecting someone, and she kept adjusting the position of the chair, angling it slightly away from me. It wasn't a big deal, just odd. I started making up excuses to shorten the session, saying my shoulder felt better, that I had an appointment, anything to get out of there. I practically bolted from Ren's office. I didn't even say goodbye. I just grabbed my bag and headed for the front desk, needing to get outside to breathe. Trudy was at the desk, filing her nails. She didn't even look up when I said I was leaving. She just mumbled a right then. I hurried through the lobby, and that's when I saw him. He was standing near the window looking out at the grounds. I hadn't seen him before. He was an older guy, maybe in his 60s, wearing a worn tweed jacket even though it wasn't cold. He wasn't doing anything, just watching, but he turned his head as I walked past, and his eyes met mine. That's when it hit me. He knew. He had that same knowing look that Ren had, that Trudy sometimes got. He smiled, a small, tight smile. He said, very quietly, "Enjoyed the hydrotherapy, did you?" Hydrotherapy. That was months ago. It was during the really bad phase. Nobody outside the team knew about that. Nobody. I stopped dead. He hadn't been introduced and wasn't a visitor. No one had mentioned him. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just kept smiling. Then, Fran, one of the nurses, came rushing out of a side door, looking flustered. "Oh, there you are. Weston needs you. He left his sketchbook in the garden. He says he's worried about the rain." Weston, the quiet kid, always drawing. It was a distraction, I guess. Fran was practically pushing me toward the back exit. "He's quite upset. He says it has all his progress in it." I let her steer me, needing to get away from the man in the tweed jacket. Maybe he was a relative of one of the patients. Maybe I was overreacting. But as soon as we were outside, Fran said, "He's over by the rose bushes. Be quick, the sky's looking ominous." And that's when I noticed the front door was closing, slowly. Trudy was standing there, watching me, and the door clicked shut. I was outside, but locked in. The rain hadn't let up. It wasn't a downpour, more like a constant gray weeping. I kept walking the perimeter, trying every gate, every section of fence, nothing. Trudy hadn't even come to check on me. I shouted a few times, but the wind swallowed the sound. I finally sat on the wet stone of a low wall, near the greenhouses, just cold. Then my phone buzzed. I hadn't even thought about it. It was Mona. "Hey, just checking in. Heard about the weather. Everything okay?" Okay. Everything was spectacularly not okay. I typed back a short "fine," just a bit of a walk. I didn't want to worry her, didn't want to explain. She called immediately. "A walk? Where are you? I thought you were still at Crestwood." Crestwood. That's what they'd called it. I hadn't really paid attention to the name. I left. They let me go. Said I was well enough for a day pass. A lie, a clumsy, desperate lie. There was a long pause. "They let you? Without telling me? Without a discharge plan? That's not how they operate." Her voice was strained. "Look, it doesn't matter. I'm fine." It does matter. That place, it's not just rehab, you know. It's a secure facility. They don't just let people wander off. The blood drained from my face. Secure facility, that explained the gates, the quiet, the way everyone seemed watched. It explained the man in the tweed jacket. He hadn't been a visitor, he'd been monitoring me. Maybe it was some kind of experimental place, some study I'd been unknowingly enrolled in. "I need to go," I said, cutting her off. "I'll explain later." I hung up, my hands shaking. I wasn't going to stay and wait for them to decide what to do with me. I needed to get to the bus stop, get to the city, disappear. I started walking again, faster this time, heading for the main road. And then I saw him, Weston, standing by the gate, watching me. Not approaching, just watching. He didn't look surprised to see me trying to leave. He just smiled, a small, knowing smile. It's funny, the things you forget, or maybe not forget, exactly, more like compartmentalize. For years, I didn't think about the chipped formica of that diner counter. I didn't think about the smell of stale coffee and something vaguely floral, like old lady perfume. I just didn't. I made it to the city. Eventually, Lena helped mostly with finding a place and a job. She kept asking about Weston, about the facility. I told her what I remembered, which wasn't much. It felt like trying to grasp smoke. I convinced myself it was just a really intense, messed up rehab, a place that pushed boundaries. Maybe they had some unconventional methods. That's what I told myself anyway. Then the notes started. Small things at first, a postcard with a picture of the rose garden at the facility. There was no message. Then a book was left on my doorstep, a first edition of a poetry collection I'd mentioned, almost in passing, during one of my intake sessions with Trudy. How could anyone know that? It wasn't like it was a favorite poet. It was just something I'd said. I started looking over my shoulder constantly. Every crowded street, every shadowed doorway. I kept expecting to see him, Weston, or someone like him, but it never was. It was always just a feeling, a prickling on the back of my neck. I reported it to the police, of course. They took a report and asked a few questions. Probably just someone playing a prank, the officer said. He didn't seem to take it seriously. I didn't push it. What could I even say? Now, I still check the rearview mirror. Every time I pull into a parking space, I scan the surrounding cars, not for dents or scratches, but for faces. Just faces, it's automatic. I don't even realize I'm doing it half the time. Just a quick sweeping glance, and then another, and another. I stumbled across a post online last week, someone describing a really strange ambulance ride after an injury. It was the small details that got to me. The way the driver avoided main roads, the unsettling quiet. Reading it felt wrong, because almost exactly the same thing happened to me a few months ago after a car crash. I hadn't talked about it much, and I certainly hadn't looked for anyone else's experience, but seeing those words felt like a jolt. I kept digging, though, after finding that other post, the one describing almost the exact same weirdness after a car crash. I spent a whole Saturday just combing through forums. I looked at accident reports, ambulance complaints, and anything remotely related. It was mostly just people venting about wait times or billing issues, the usual, but then I found another one. It wasn't a direct match. This one was a motorcycle accident, but the details the driver taking a more direct route that wasn't the unsettling quiet. This guy even mentioned the smell, that sterile, almost metallic scent. It was on a forum for EMTs, actually. A guy named Silas was asking if anyone else had noticed a recent increase in requests to divert to St. Jude's, even when other hospitals were closer or better equipped for the injuries. He got mostly shrugs and a few jokes about St. Jude's having better coffee. No one seemed concerned. But then someone, Loretta, I think, replied, and her comment was just gone. Deleted. I refreshed the page 12 times. It wasn't cached anywhere. That's when I started to actually feel uneasy. Not scared, exactly. Just off. I figured maybe the forum had moderation issues. Someone reported the comment, that sort of thing. It was probably harmless. Still, I screenshot everything, every post, every reply. I even started a document cataloging the similarities between the accidents. It felt productive, like I was doing something to understand it. I tried calling St. Jude's directly, just to ask about their emergency intake procedures. The phone just rang and rang. Eventually, it went to a recorded message saying all lines were currently busy, which is odd, right, for a hospital? But it's a big city. They probably just get slammed. I told myself it was probably just that, just a busy signal. I kept trying St. Jude's all day yesterday, just getting that busy signal. It's ridiculous. I started thinking maybe there was some kind of system-wide outage, some phone company thing. It had to be. Otherwise it felt deliberate. I went back to the forum, rereading Silas's post. He was asking about these gray routes they were told to take, bypassing the usual trauma centers, and Loretta's comment just gone, deleted. That's what really got to me. I started mapping out the incidents people had posted about. A cluster near the 405, another south of the city, and a few scattered around the industrial district. It looked like they were all being funneled towards a smaller facility. Crestwood. I didn't recognize the name. Yesterday evening, I decided to drive by St. Jude's just to see. I took a different route than I normally would, just in case. It was dark, raining, and the hospital was quiet. Too quiet. No ambulances, no flashing lights, just a single security guard at the entrance. And then I heard it, a low hum. Not like traffic, not machinery. It was resonant, like a tuning fork held near your ear. I stopped the car, rolled down the window. It was coming from inside the hospital. I told myself it was the ventilation system. Old building, old equipment, but it didn't sound like ventilation. It was organized, a rhythmic pulse almost. And then as I sat there, a van pulled up to the emergency entrance, unmarked, no logos. Two paramedics jumped out, quickly wheeling a gurney inside. They didn't look at me, didn't look at anything. They just disappeared into the building. I drove away. Fast. I kept driving, just driving. I needed to get away from the hospital, from the van, from those paramedics. It wasn't right. The way they didn't look at you, didn't see you like you were an object being moved, not a person. I pulled over at a gas station. I needed coffee, something to stop my hands from shaking. That's when I saw him. Silas. He was standing by the pumps, looking right at me. He was one of the paramedics from the van. He didn't wave, didn't acknowledge me at all, just watched. I ducked down and pretended to be messing with the radio. Maybe he hadn't recognized the car. I got the coffee black and headed back onto the highway. I checked my rearview mirror constantly. Silas wasn't there, but 10 minutes later, a black SUV, the same model as the one from St. Jude's, started tailing me. It kept a steady distance, not speeding and not falling behind. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. It was daylight finally, and everything looked wrong. Not dramatically, just off, like a photograph slightly out of focus. I drove straight to the precinct, needing to tell someone. Officer Rand was on duty. He listened, which was something. I laid it all out. The gas station, the man, the vehicles. He took notes and asked a lot of questions about descriptions. I kept going back to the eyes, that flat, unseeing look. Rand kept asking about the vehicles, make, model, plates. I couldn't give him much. They were dark and unmarked. He ran a check on the license plate. I thought I remembered. Nothing. Maybe it was a private security detail, Rand said, tapping his pen. A high net worth individual needs discretion. It happens all the time. It sounded reasonable, too reasonable, like he was trying to reassure himself as much as me. I asked about the hospital, if there'd been any reports of unusual activity, diverted ambulances, anything. He said he'd check. He came back after 1 hour looking uncomfortable. We pulled the hospital's dispatch logs. There was a transport last night, around the time you said, a John Doe with multiple trauma, but it went to City General as standard protocol. City General. Not the old St. Jude's. I remembered the humming, the feeling of being deliberately steered away. But I saw them, I said, my voice tight. I saw them take him. They weren't going to City General. Rand sighed. Look, it's a busy city. Ambulances get rerouted. Sometimes things get miscommunicated. We'll keep an eye out, but honestly, it sounds like you were stressed, maybe seeing things. I'd taken pictures at the gas station, pointed my phone at the vehicle as it pulled away. I showed Rand. The photos were blank, just static, like the camera malfunctioned. Rand shrugged. Sometimes that happens with phone cameras. I felt a coldness creep into my chest. It wasn't a malfunction, they knew. It's been years. I don't talk about it. Not really. Rand thought I was hysterical, and honestly, looking back, I can see why he did, but it wasn't just the ambulance. It was everything after. I tried to find out where they took him. The guy from the gas station, the one with the leg. I called every hospital within 50 miles. Nothing. There was no record of anyone matching the description being admitted that night. Then I started noticing it with other things. Small accidents, fender benders, ambulances, but not the usual kind. They were darker and had no markings, and they always seemed to avoid the main hospitals. I'd see them on the highway, taking the back roads, heading towards that industrial park outside of town, the one with the old abandoned textile mill. I figured they were using it as a temporary triage center, overwhelmed hospitals, you know? Maybe a disaster preparedness thing. It made a kind of sense. I even drove out there a few times. Nothing. Just empty buildings and broken windows. But the ambulances kept going. I stopped trying to follow them. I realized it wasn't about helping people. It was about controlling where people went, who got care. And it wasn't random. It was targeted. People who were alone, people with no family nearby. I haven't been to a gas station late at night since. Not alone. I always check my rearview mirror. Not for cars exactly, just for the darkness. Before I get out, I always check, every single time, Just a quick glance, just to make sure nothing's creeping up behind me. I don't even know why I do it anymore. It just happens. I was 24, freshly out of the hospital, and utterly useless. The recovery was supposed to be simple, weeks spent on the sofa, slowly rebuilding strength. I'd moved back in with my parents for the time being, which felt regressive, but necessary. It was a quiet stretch, mostly filled with daytime television and a lot of bland, soft food. Everything felt strangely normal at first. The physical therapy was tedious. Just little movements mostly. Cal, the therapist, was nice enough. He kept saying I was progressing faster than most people after a surgery like mine, but it was exhausting, and honestly, I was just looking forward to getting back to something resembling normal. Mom kept making these elaborate meals, which was sweet, but mostly I just picked at them. Everything tasted muted. Derek showed up again yesterday while I was trying to do my leg lifts. He brought a casserole, some kind of potato thing. He said he'd heard from Loretta, who lives across the street, that Mom was doing so much and he wanted to help. I thanked him, of course, and Mom insisted he stay for coffee. He accepted immediately. He started tidying up the living room while we talked. Not like dusting or vacuuming, but rearranging. He moved the throw pillows on the couch, then moved them back to where they were, then moved them again. It wasn't cleaning, it was adjusting. He did the same with the picture frames on the mantelpiece, shifting them a centimeter to the left, then right, then left again. I caught myself staring. I figured he must have some kind of obsessive-compulsive thing. It explained the whole thing, right? Just a quirk. A harmless need for order. I even mentioned it to Mom later, phrasing it as, "Derek seems like he really likes things just so." She just shrugged and said he was a particular man. This morning I found a small silver object on the windowsill in my bedroom. It looked like a tiny camera. It was shaped like a button. I picked it up and turned it over in my hand. It was definitely a camera. I haven't told anyone yet. I thought maybe Tad, when he was fixing the gutters last month, accidentally left it behind. He does that kind of work. You know? Maybe he uses it to check his angles or something. I put it in a drawer. I didn't sleep well after finding that thing. I kept replaying it, trying to remember if Tad had been up on the ladder near my window. I couldn't picture it. I ended up just scrolling on my phone until dawn, feeling stupid for even worrying. This morning I decided to walk to the pharmacy myself, just to get out of the house, and I didn't really want Mom to drive me. It felt childish, needing a ride for a 10-minute trip. I took the long way past Loretta's garden. She was out there, deadheading roses. She waved and I waved back, but she started talking about Cal. She said he was nice to visit so often and how thoughtful he was. She said he'd been asking about my recovery, specifically about how well I was sleeping. That felt off. Cal hadn't mentioned that in our sessions. He just focused on the exercises. When I got back, Derek was already here. He was in the kitchen making tea for my mom. He said he'd just stopped by to check if she needed anything. He offered to carry my bag, but I said no, thanks. I went straight to my room. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except the book I'd been reading was open on my desk. I distinctly remember leaving it face down on the nightstand. I tried to tell myself I was just forgetting things. The painkillers. Maybe. But then I noticed the small ceramic bird my grandmother gave me. The one that always sits on the windowsill was now facing the doorway. It had been facing the garden. It wasn't a big deal, really, just odd. I started thinking maybe Derek was trying to be helpful, tidying up. Maybe he saw me as fragile, needing things arranged just so. But that didn't explain why he'd ask Loretta about my sleep. It didn't explain the camera. I kept replaying the image of the camera in my head. Tiny, nestled inside the smoke detector. It felt invasive, obviously, but also stupid, like a teenager playing a prank. Maybe Derek had a history. I don't know. He always seemed eager. Eager to help. Eager to know how I was feeling. It was annoying, sure, but hardly criminal. I called Loretta and told her what I found. She was furious and said she'd talk to him. I felt a little ridiculous, honestly. Overreacting. Then I noticed my slippers weren't by the bed. I always leave them by the bed. Always. I found them on the back porch, neatly side by side, facing the garden. That was different. Loretta came over while I was looking. She was pale. She said Derek had been at her house earlier, asking about my medication, about how long I'd be needing help, asking if she thought I was lonely. She stopped mid-sentence, staring out the window. I followed her gaze. Derek was in his car, parked across the street. He wasn't just sitting there. He was watching the house. Just watching. He saw us looking. He didn't wave, didn't even acknowledge us. He just reversed and drove away. Later, I found a file on my computer, a text document. It was a list. My daily routine times, I took my medication, when I usually ate, when I went to the bathroom. Everything. It wasn't a detailed clinical observation. It was personal. It included things only someone in the house would know, like how I always hummed off key when I made tea, or that I always checked the back door twice before bed. I thought maybe he was worried about me being alone. Maybe he thought he was protecting me, but the way he looked at me across the street, it wasn't protection. It was something else, something cold, and I realized, with a sickening lurch, he hadn't been trying to help me recover. He'd been studying me. I called Theron. He was my therapist, obviously, and I told him everything. I told him about the list and about seeing Derek watching the house. I tried to sound calm, I guess, like it was a puzzle, not a terror. He listened mostly. He asked a lot of questions about my anxiety levels and about how the injury was affecting my perception. It felt like he wasn't really hearing me. He kept circling back to stress and recovery. Stella was more helpful and practical. She offered to call the police, but I didn't want that. It felt extreme. Darek hadn't done anything illegal, not exactly, just creepy. Stella insisted on installing a security camera facing the street. It was a visible one, a deterrent. It made me feel a little better seeing the blinking red light. Then I remembered the pharmacy. I'd been picking up my pain meds there for weeks, of course, and Derek always seemed to be there too. Not with me, but nearby. He was browsing and asking the pharmacist questions. I remembered him asking about delivery services, about home health aides, and about mobility aids. He'd said his aunt was recovering from surgery. That's what he'd said. I asked Loretta, the pharmacist. She said Darek hadn't mentioned an aunt. He'd been asking about me, specifically about my medication schedule. He'd asked if I used a particular pharmacy-run delivery service and when my refills were usually due. Loretta said he'd been unusually insistent. I started to think he wasn't just watching me. He was preparing. Preparing for what? Maybe he thought I wasn't taking my medication correctly. Maybe he was some kind of self-appointed wellness checker, gone off the rails. It was insane, but it felt less terrifying than the alternative. Then Stella showed me the camera footage. Darek wasn't looking at the house. He was looking at the camera. He was testing its range and adjusting his position. He knew it was there, and he didn't seem to care. It's funny, the things you get used to. After a while, the feeling of being watched just becomes the background. It's not comfortable. Exactly. More like a low hum, always there. I still jump if someone stands too close behind me, but it's not the same. It's not the same panic. Stella kept saying I should go to the police. I tried explaining it to Cal, my therapist again. He said it was displacement, that I was projecting anxiety about the recovery onto Derek. He seemed so sure, I almost believed him, almost. I kept thinking about the way Derek looked at me, though. Not at me, through me, like he was cataloging something. I moved the furniture around a lot, trying to break line of sight with the camera. It felt ridiculous, like playing hide and seek with someone who already knows where you are. Then I started leaving lights on in different rooms, just to see if he'd react. Nothing. It was like he wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I started to think he wasn't trying to scare me. Maybe he was lonely. Maybe he just needed to observe things. He'd mentioned being a birdwatcher once at a party, a really long time ago. I remembered him talking about the patience it took, the stillness. Maybe it wasn't about me at all. Maybe I was just a convenient subject for his hobby. It's been 5 years, I guess. I don't drive anymore. Not because I'm afraid, not exactly. But if someone's standing on a corner just watching, I don't take the route. I don't even think about it, really. I just choose a different way home. It's just easier. There are always other roads,